Welcome to Sleep Stories for Guys, where I narrate stories to fall asleep to about the things you care about. World War II, American history, Cold War spies, and other things every guy cares about. Tonight's story will take you back 8 decades, to the front lines of World War II, as the Allied and Axis forces fought for control in one of the most pivotal battles of the war. With me, you'll embed yourself in the conflict alongside 19 and 20-year-old soldiers and trace the eventual Allied victory until you fall asleep. But before I begin, take a minute to get settled. Adjust your pillows and blankets. Take one final sip of water and release any tension you may be storing in your arms, your shoulders, your back, your legs. Feel the muscles in your face and release any tension around your eyes. Relax your jaw and move downward through your entire body until you reach the soles of your feet, releasing any tension as you notice it. Also, take a moment to notice your breathing. Breathe deeply, then exhale slowly, and feel the tension leaving your shoulders, your back, and your waist. Good. We're ready to begin. The crisp winter air bites at the faces of American soldiers huddled around a small fire in the Ardennes forest. It's December 1944, and the Western Front has fallen into an uneasy lull. The men joke and swap stories, their laughter echoing through the snow-dusted trees. A young private from Kansas, barely 19, stares into the flames, wondering if he'll be home for next Christmas. Little do these men know that in mere days this tranquil forest will become a hellscape of fire, steel, and blood. Across Europe, a sense of inevitable victory permeates the Allied forces. The beaches of Normandy, stormed just 6 months ago, are now a distant memory. Paris has been liberated, and American troops are pushing towards the German border. The Nazi war machine, once seemingly invincible, appears to be on its last legs. In London and Washington, generals and politicians are already discussing post-war plans. The end of the war in Europe seems just around the corner. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander, sits in his headquarters, poring over maps and reports. His weathered face, etched with the strain of command, betrays a hint of optimism. The Allied advance has been swift, perhaps too swift. Supply lines are stretched thin, and the troops are exhausted. But surely, Eisenhower thinks, the Germans are in no position to mount a significant counteroffensive. He takes a sip of coffee, grimacing at its bitterness, a luxury in these times of rationing. Meanwhile, in the southern sector of the Allied line, General George S. Patton grows restless. The flamboyant and controversial commander of the Third Army is itching to push forward, to smash through the Siegfried Line and drive straight into the heart of Germany. His aggressive style has served the Allies well, but now he finds himself reined in, his forces on the defensive. Patton paces in his command tent, his polished boots leaving imprints in the muddy ground. He can smell victory, and the forced inaction grates on his nerves. To the north, British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery meticulously plans the next phase of the Allied advance. His cautious approach often clashes with Patton's boldness, creating tension in the Allied High Command. But for now, both generals find their armies in a holding pattern, consolidating gains and replenishing supplies. Montgomery, ever the perfectionist, insists on reviewing every detail of the supply situation, much to the frustration of his staff. This complacency extends to the frontline troops. In the Ardennes sector, considered a quiet zone, the Americans have placed their greenest divisions alongside battle-weary veterans in need of rest. The dense forest, with its steep valleys and winding roads, seems an unlikely place for a major German attack. It's the perfect place to break in new recruits and give the exhausted a breather. Sergeant Mike O'Brien, a veteran of North Africa and Sicily, finds himself playing nursemaid to a bunch of fresh-faced kids from the Midwest. He tries to impart some hard-earned wisdom, but most of them are more interested in griping about the cold and dreaming of home. But appearances can be deceiving. Deep in the heart of Germany, in a secret underground bunker, Adolf Hitler hunches over a large map table. His once imposing figure is now stooped, his left hand trembling uncontrollably, a symptom of the Parkinson's disease that ravages his body. Yet his eyes burn with a fervent intensity as he outlines his audacious plan to his skeptical generals. The room is tense, filled with the acrid smell of cigarette smoke and the underlying fear of contradicting the Führer. "Gentlemen," Hitler declares, his voice filled with manic energy, "we will strike the Americans where they least expect it. Through the Ardennes, just as we did in 1940. We will split their forces in two, capture their supply dumps, and then swing north to seize Antwerp. Without this port, the Allies will be crippled." His finger traces the planned route on the map, leaving a faint smudge on the paper. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the commander of German forces in the west, listens with growing concern. The plan is bold, perhaps brilliant, but the resources simply aren't there. The Wehrmacht has been bled white on both the eastern and western fronts. Where will they find the men, the tanks, the fuel for such an ambitious offensive? He clears his throat, preparing to voice his doubts, but a glare from Hitler silences him. But Hitler will not be dissuaded. He's scraping together every available resource for this operation, codenamed Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine. Elite SS Panzer divisions, fuel stocks, ammunition, all are being quietly moved into position under the cover of the dense Ardennes forest. It's a logistical nightmare, but German efficiency and desperation are making it happen. To lead this desperate gamble, Hitler has called upon SS Oberstgruppenführer Josef Sepp Dietrich, a fanatically loyal Nazi and commander of the 6th Panzer Army. Dietrich is no strategic genius, but he's a fierce fighter and unquestioningly obedient to Hitler. His forces will form the tip of the spear in the coming offensive. Dietrich stands at attention, his chest puffed out with pride at being chosen for this crucial mission. As German preparations intensify, the Allied intelligence apparatus fails spectacularly. Reports of German troop movements are dismissed or misinterpreted. The very idea that the battered Wehrmacht could mount a major offensive seems laughable to many Allied commanders. In a smoke-filled room in Paris, intelligence officers argue over the meaning of intercepted messages, ultimately deciding they're a German ruse. In the Ardennes itself, the scene is set for disaster. The American front line is thinly held, with just 4 divisions stretched across an 80-mile front. Many of these are green troops sent to this quiet sector to gain experience. Veterans joke that you can make sergeant in the Ardennes just by surviving a night patrol. Private First Class Johnny Williams, fresh out of basic training, shivers in his foxhole, wondering if he'll ever see action. Be careful what you wish for, kid. One of these inexperienced units is the 106th Infantry Division, newly arrived from the States. They've taken up positions along a ridge known as the Schnee Eifel, relieving the battle-hardened 2nd Infantry Division. The men of the 106th are eager to prove themselves, but they're about to face a baptism of fire beyond their worst nightmares. Lieutenant Robert Parker, barely older than the men he commands, tries to project confidence as he inspects the defensive positions. Inside, he's terrified of letting his men down. In the town of Bastogne, a crucial road junction, life goes on as usual. American soldiers mingle with locals in cafes, enjoying a brief respite from the war. None of them realize that in a matter of days, their sleepy town will become the epicenter of one of the war's most crucial battles. In a small bistro, Corporal Dave Martinez shares a drink with a pretty Belgian girl, both of them blissfully unaware of the storm that's about to break. The night of December 15th is unusually quiet. An eerie stillness descends upon the Ardennes as a heavy fog rolls in, blanketing the forest in a thick white shroud. In their foxholes and bunkers, American soldiers huddle against the cold, unaware of the massive build-up occurring just miles away. The silence is broken only by the occasional bark of a fox or the distant rumble of vehicles, dismissed as routine movement. Across the line, German troops make final preparations. Young Wehrmacht privates check their weapons nervously, while hardened SS veterans paint white camouflage on their tanks. They've been told this offensive will turn the tide of the war, that victory is within grasp if they can just break through the American lines. Oberscharführer Hans Müller, a veteran of the Russian front, knows better than to believe in easy victories, but he keeps his doubts to himself. In his command post, Eisenhower receives reports of increased German radio traffic and strange sounds coming from beyond the front lines. But, with the bad weather grounding reconnaissance flights, there's no way to confirm what's happening. He decides to wait for more information before raising the alarm, a decision that will haunt him in the coming days. Patton, hundreds of miles to the south, is focused on his own plans for an offensive. In a move that will soon prove prescient, he's ordered his staff to begin drawing up contingency plans for a rapid shift northward. Just in case, he tells them, though few believe such a move will be necessary. His chief of staff, Colonel Hobart Gay, works through the night, fueled by coffee and Patton's relentless energy. As the clock ticks toward midnight, the fate of the war hangs in the balance. The Germans have achieved near-perfect surprise, massing over 200,000 men and nearly 1,000 tanks for the assault. The unsuspecting Americans are about to be hit by a sledgehammer of steel and fire. In these final hours of peace, small human moments play out across the front. An American lieutenant writes a letter home, promising his wife he'll be back for Christmas. A German tank commander shares a last cigarette with his crew, steeling themselves for the battle to come. In a small Belgian village, a young girl places a candle in the window, a silent prayer for peace in a world torn apart by war. Dawn on December 16th will bring chaos and bloodshed on a scale not seen since D-Day. The Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last gamble to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, is about to begin. And for the American forces standing in its path, it will be a brutal awakening from their winter slumber. As the first light of dawn begins to penetrate the foggy Ardennes forest on December 16th, an earth-shattering roar shatters the silence. The massed artillery of 3 German armies opens fire, sending thousands of shells screaming towards the American lines. The greatest battle in US military history is about to unfold, and the fate of World War II hangs in the balance. The Battle of the Bulge will test the mettle of American soldiers as never before. It will see acts of incredible heroism and sacrifice, strategic blunders and strokes of genius. From the frozen foxholes of Bastogne to the situation rooms of Supreme Headquarters, the next few weeks will determine the course of the war and shape the future of the world. As shells begin to rain down and German tanks rumble forward, the American forces in the Ardennes are about to face the fight of their lives. The calm has been shattered, and the storm is upon them. In foxholes and command posts alike, men brace themselves for the onslaught, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The battle that will define a generation is about to begin. The Blitzkrieg strikes back, December 16th to 20, 1944. The pre-dawn stillness of the Ardennes forest shatters as the roar of German artillery tears through the air. It's 5:30 a.m. on December 16th, 1944, and Operation Watch on the Rhine has begun. The night sky lights up with the flash of thousands of guns, their shells arcing towards the unsuspecting American lines. The ground trembles, trees splinter, and in an instant, the quiet sector erupts into chaos. Private Johnny Williams, the green recruit we met earlier, is jolted awake by the thunderous barrage. His hands shake as he fumbles for his helmet and rifle. "This can't be happening," he mutters, his voice drowned out by the cacophony of explosions. Around him, his fellow soldiers scramble to make sense of the sudden assault. The veterans among them recognize the sound of danger, their faces grim with the realization that this is no mere probing attack. As the artillery continues to pound the American positions, German infantry and armor begin their advance. Through the early morning fog, the outline of panzer tanks emerges, their engines growling as they push forward. The plan is simple but audacious. 3 German armies will punch through the weakest part of the Allied line, cross the Meuse River, and drive all the way to the vital port of Antwerp. At the tip of this armoured spear is the 1st SS Panzer Division, the infamous Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler. Led by the fanatical Joachim Peiper, these elite troops have been tasked with spearheading the assault. Peiper, a ruthless commander with a reputation for brutality, urges his men forward. "We'll be drinking cognac in Paris by Christmas," he boasts, his eyes gleaming with the prospect of victory. The initial German onslaught falls heavily on the inexperienced troops of the 106th Infantry Division. Positioned along the Schnee Eifel, these green units find themselves quickly overwhelmed. Lieutenant Robert Parker, the young officer we met earlier, tries desperately to rally his men. "Hold the line!" he shouts over the din of battle, but it's clear they're outgunned and outmaneuvered. As the morning progresses, reports of German breakthroughs begin to flood American command posts. At First Army headquarters, General Courtney Hodges receives the news with growing alarm. The scope of the attack is far larger than anyone had anticipated. Hodges gets on the phone with General Omar Bradley, commander of the 12th Army Group, his voice tense. "We're facing a major offensive, sir. They're coming at us all along the line." Bradley, initially skeptical, soon realizes the gravity of the situation. He orders all available reserves to the Ardennes, but it will take time for these reinforcements to arrive. In the meantime, the thinly spread American forces must hold out against the full might of the German war machine. One of the key objectives for the Germans is the town of St. Vith, a crucial road junction. The defense of this strategic point falls to the 7th Armored Division and elements of the 106th Infantry. As German forces close in, Brigadier General Bruce Clark takes charge of the defense. "We hold here, or the whole damn front collapses," he tells his men, his jaw set with determination. Further north, at the critical road junction of Bastogne, the situation is equally dire. The town, vital to both German and American plans, is defended by a hastily assembled group of units. Among them is the 101st Airborne Division, the famed Screaming Eagles, who have been rushed to the area from their rest area in France. As news of the attack spreads, confusion reigns among the Allied High Command. In the SHAEF, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force War Room, General Eisenhower grapples with fragmented and often contradictory reports. The true scale of the German offensive is still unclear, but Ike knows he needs to act fast. He turns to his staff, his face etched with concern. "Gentlemen, we're in for one hell of a fight." Back on the front lines, the American forces are being pushed back all along the Bulge. The Germans, exploiting their initial surprise, press their advantage. Tanks roll through small Belgian villages, their tracks leaving deep imprints in the snow-covered roads. The sky is thick with smoke and the acrid smell of cordite. In the Losheim Gap, a critical weak point in the American lines, the German 6th Panzer Army achieves a significant breakthrough. American units, caught off guard and outnumbered, begin to retreat in disarray. Sergeant Mike O'Brien, the veteran we met earlier, finds himself leading a ragtag group of survivors through the foggy forest. "Keep moving, boys," he urges, knowing that to stop is to risk capture or worse. As the day wears on, acts of individual heroism begin to emerge amidst the chaos. Near the town of Lanzerath, a small group of American intelligence and reconnaissance troops, led by a 20-year-old lieutenant named Lyle Book Jr., holds off an entire German battalion for nearly a day. Their stubborn defense buys precious time for other American units to regroup. But not all encounters end so nobly. In one of the darkest episodes of the battle, Joachim Peiper's SS troops encounter a group of American prisoners near the town of Malmedy. What happens next will go down in history as the Malmedy Massacre. Scores of unarmed American soldiers are gunned down in cold blood, their bodies left in the snow. News of this atrocity spreads quickly among American troops, hardening their resolve and fueling a desire for revenge. As night falls on December 16th, the full extent of the German offensive becomes clear. They've achieved a penetration nearly 50 miles wide and 30 miles deep into the American lines. The bulge that gives the battle its name is beginning to take shape on Allied maps. In Washington, D.C., news of the attack catches President Franklin D. Roosevelt off guard. He summons his military advisors, demanding answers. "How did we let this happen?" he asks, his frustration evident. The president knows that public morale, already strained by years of war, could be severely impacted by this setback. December 17th dawns with no respite for the beleaguered American forces. The Germans continue to push forward, their advance spearheaded by panzer divisions that seem unstoppable, but cracks in the German plan are starting to show. The narrow, winding roads of the Ardennes, combined with stiff American resistance in key locations, are slowing the advance. One such point of resistance is the town of St. Vith. General Clark's defense of the town is becoming the stuff of legend. Despite being surrounded and heavily outnumbered, the American forces refuse to yield. Clark moves from position to position, encouraging his men and coordinating the defense. "Every hour we hold them here is an hour they're not moving towards the Meuse," he reminds his troops. Meanwhile, in Bastogne, the 101st Airborne and other units prepare for the inevitable German assault. The town, situated at the intersection of 7 important roads, is crucial to the German timetable. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, acting commander of the 101st, organizes the defense with grim determination. "They want Bastogne," he quips to his staff. "Well, they're going to have to come and get it." As the battle rages, the weather becomes an additional enemy for both sides. A thick fog descends over the Ardennes, grounding Allied air forces and negating one of their biggest advantages. The American troops, many of whom were unprepared for winter combat, suffer in the bitter cold. Cases of frostbite begin to rival combat injuries in the aid stations. On December 18th, General Eisenhower calls a meeting of his top commanders at Verdun. The mood is tense as they assess the situation. It's here that Eisenhower makes a crucial decision. He places General Patton in charge of the counterattack from the south. Patton, ever the aggressive commander, confidently declares he can have 3 divisions moving towards Bastogne within 48 hours. Many in the room are skeptical, but Eisenhower trusts Patton's ability to deliver. "Give George the road," Ike orders, setting in motion one of the most remarkable military maneuvers of the war. As Patton rushes to reorient his Third Army for the counterattack, the situation in the Bulge continues to deteriorate. On December 19th, Peiper's battle group reaches the village of La Glaise, just a few miles from the Meuse River. The German plan seems to be working, but supply issues are beginning to plague their advance. The weather, which has hampered Allied air support, also slows the German supply lines to a crawl. In Bastogne, the noose begins to tighten. German forces surround the town, cutting off the 101st Airborne and other defending units. General McAuliffe rallies his troops, knowing they need to hold out until relief arrives. "Men, we're paratroopers," he reminds them. "We're supposed to be surrounded." The siege of Bastogne becomes a symbol of American resistance. Despite dwindling supplies and constant German attacks, the defenders refuse to yield. Their stubborn defense throws the entire German timetable into disarray. By December 20th, the initial shock of the German offensive has worn off, and the Americans begin to regain their footing. General Patton's Third Army is on the move, racing northward in an almost miraculous logistical feat. The German advance, while still threatening, has lost some of its initial momentum. In the skies, a break in the weather allows Allied air forces to join the battle. P-47 Thunderbolts and RAF Typhoons swoop down on German columns, wreaking havoc on their already strained supply lines. The tables are starting to turn, but the battle is far from over. As night falls on December 20th, both sides pause to take stock. The Germans, while still advancing, are behind schedule and facing increasing resistance. The Americans, though battered, are regrouping and preparing to counterattack. The Battle of the Bulge has reached a critical juncture. In foxholes and command posts across the Ardennes, men on both sides wonder what the coming days will bring. The outcome of the battle, and perhaps the war itself, hangs in the balance. As another cold night settles over the battlefield, the stage is set for the next phase of this epic struggle. The Blitzkrieg has indeed struck back, but the question remains: can it deliver the knockout blow Hitler so desperately needs? Or will American grit and determination stem the tide and turn the tables on the German war machine? The answers will come in the crucible of combat as the Battle of the Bulge rages on. As the first light of dawn breaks on December 21st, the Ardennes battlefield is a scene of chaos and determination. The German offensive, now in its 6th day, has created a massive bulge in the Allied lines, but the element of surprise is gone. Now it's a race against time as both sides commit everything they have to this crucial battle. In the early morning hours, General George S. Patton kneels in prayer in a makeshift chapel near his headquarters. "Lord, get me good weather so I can kill Germans," he mutters, his voice a mix of supplication and command. As if in answer, the skies begin to clear, setting the stage for one of the most audacious counterattacks in military history. Patton's Third Army is on the move, having performed a Herculean feat of logistics and determination. In just 48 hours, they've turned 90 degrees and advanced nearly 100 miles north. The lead elements of the 4th Armoured Division spearheading the relief effort can almost smell the gunpowder from besieged Bastogne. Inside Bastogne, the situation is growing desperate. The men of the 101st Airborne and other attached units have been holding out for days, surrounded on all sides by German forces. Ammunition is running low, medical supplies are scarce, and the winter cold is taking its toll. Yet the spirit of the defenders remains unbroken. On this day, a German delegation approaches the American lines under a flag of truce. They carry a message for Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, the acting commander of the 101st. The message is simple: surrender or face annihilation. McAuliffe reads the ultimatum, looks up at his staff, and utters one word that will go down in history: nuts. When the German officers ask for clarification on this peculiarly American response, Colonel Joseph H. Harper translates with barely concealed glee, "It means, go to hell." The defiant answer electrifies the defenders of Bastogne, and soon spreads throughout the Allied forces, becoming a rallying cry for the entire army. As news of McAuliffe's defiance spreads, American resolve stiffens all along the line. In St. Vith, General Bruce Clark continues to lead a heroic defense against overwhelming odds. The town, A crucial road junction has held out far longer than the Germans anticipated, throwing their entire timetable into disarray. But the pressure is relentless. By the afternoon of December 21st, Clark realizes that his position is untenable. With a heavy heart, he orders a fighting withdrawal. "We've done our job," he tells his men. "Now we regroup and hit them again." The loss of St. Vith is a blow, but the stubborn defense has bought precious time for the Allies to marshal their counterattack. Meanwhile, in the skies above the Ardennes, the improved weather brings a new element to the battle. Swarms of Allied aircraft descend on the German columns, strafing and bombing with impunity. P-47 Thunderbolts, nicknamed J-bows by the terrified German infantry, seem to be everywhere at once. The tables have turned, and now it's the Germans who must move under cover of darkness and bad weather. On the German side, frustration is mounting. Field Marshal Walter Model, overseeing the offensive, realizes that the element of surprise is lost. The narrow roads of the Ardennes, initially seen as a way to mask the build-up of forces, have become a bottleneck. German tanks and supply trucks are backed up for miles, presenting perfect targets for Allied aircraft. Joachim Peiper, the aggressive SS commander whose battle group had made the deepest penetration towards the Meuse River, finds himself in an increasingly precarious position. Fuel shortages force him to abandon many of his vehicles. "We have the claws of a tiger," he fumes to his staff, "but the stomach of a hummingbird." As Christmas Eve approaches, the battle enters a new phase. General Patton's forces are now fully engaged, hammering the southern flank of the German salient. In a war room in Luxembourg, Patton stands before a group of war correspondents, his ivory-handled revolvers gleaming at his hips. "We're going to go through the Germans like crap through a goose," he declares with characteristic bravado. The fight is far from over, however. On December 23rd, German forces launch a fierce assault on the thin corridor connecting Bastogne to Patton's advancing army. The stakes couldn't be higher. If they can cut off this lifeline, the defenders of Bastogne will be truly isolated. The battle rages through the night and into Christmas Eve. American soldiers, many of them young men barely out of high school, fight with a determination born of desperation. They know that if Bastogne falls, the entire Allied position could unravel. In the midst of this chaos, small acts of humanity shine through. Near the village of Foy, an American soldier named Jim notices a young German soldier lying wounded in the snow. Despite the risk, Jim crawls out to drag the enemy soldier back to American lines for medical treatment. "It's Christmas Eve," he says simply when questioned by his commanding officer. "No one should die alone today." As night falls on December 24th, an eerie calm settles over parts of the battlefield. In some sectors, German and American soldiers, their positions sometimes just yards apart, begin to sing Christmas carols. The strains of Stille Nacht and Silent Night mingle in the frosty air, a poignant reminder of the shared humanity beneath the uniforms. But the respite is brief. In the early hours of Christmas Day, the Germans launch another massive assault, determined to crush the Bastogne pocket once and for all. The night sky lights up with tracers and explosions as both sides throw everything they have into the fight. Inside Bastogne, medics work frantically to save the wounded with dwindling supplies. In a makeshift aid station, a young private named Tommy holds the hand of his dying friend. "Tell my mum I wasn't scared," the wounded soldier whispers before slipping away. Tommy nods, fighting back tears, then picks up his rifle and heads back to the line. There's no time for grief. The Germans are coming again. As Christmas Day wears on, it becomes clear that the German offensive has reached its high water mark. Although they continue to press the attack, their momentum is spent. fuel shortages, stiffening American resistance, and the relentless pounding from Allied aircraft have taken their toll. In a bunker near the front, Hitler receives reports of the battle with growing anger and disbelief. He rages at his generals, accusing them of cowardice and incompetence. But no amount of fury can change the reality on the ground. The great gamble, Operation Watch on the Rhine, is failing. Back in Bastogne, as the sun sets on Christmas Day, the defenders hear a sound that brings tears of joy to many eyes. The rumble of American tanks. Elements of Patton's 4th Armored Division have broken through, ending the siege. As the first Sherman tanks roll into the battered town, the streets erupt in cheers. Colonel Creighton Abrams, leading the relief force, meets with General McAuliffe. "Sorry we're late," Abrams grins, to which McAuliffe replies, "What took you so long?" The two men shake hands, both knowing that while a major crisis has been averted, the battle is far from over. As night falls on Christmas Day 1944, the Allied forces in the Ardennes can allow themselves a small measure of hope. They've weathered the initial storm, held the line against incredible odds, and begun to turn the tide. But the fighting is far from over. The Germans, though stalled, are not defeated, and some of the toughest combat of the war still lies ahead. In foxholes and tanks, in aid stations and command posts, American soldiers take a moment to reflect on this strangest of Christmases. They've been tested as never before, and have risen to the challenge. Many have fallen, and many more will fall before this battle is truly over. But they've held the line, and in doing so, may have saved the Allied cause in Europe. As the Ardennes settles into an uneasy quiet on this Christmas night, both sides prepare for the battles to come. The German offensive has been blunted, but now comes the grueling task of pushing them back. The Battle of the Bulge is entering its final decisive phase. The next few weeks will determine not just the outcome of this battle, but potentially the fate of the entire war in Europe. As the first light of December 26th breaks over the snow-covered Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge enters a new phase. The German offensive has been contained, but a massive salient remains driven into the Allied lines. Now the task at hand is to eliminate the Bulge and push the Germans back to their starting positions. It's a challenge that will require every ounce of courage, skill, and determination the Allied forces can muster. The day after Christmas brings a gift that General Eisenhower has been praying for: clear skies. The improved weather allows Allied air power to be unleashed in full force. Swarms of fighter bombers darken the skies over German positions. P-47 Thunderbolts and British Typhoons swoop down, rockets blazing, wreaking havoc on enemy armor and supply lines. From his command post, Field Marshal Walter Model watches with growing despair as his forces are pummeled from above. "It's like the Luftwaffe doesn't exist," he mutters to his staff. Indeed, the once mighty German Air Force is but a shadow of its former self, unable to challenge Allied air supremacy. On the ground, General Patton's Third Army continues its relentless drive northward. The relief of Bastogne was just the beginning. Now Patton aims to split the German salient in two. His forces push towards Houffalize, a key road junction at the heart of the Bulge. The going is tough. The Germans contest every inch of ground, and the winter weather remains a formidable adversary. In the northern sector of the Bulge, Field Marshal Montgomery finally launches his long-awaited counter-offensive. The British commander's cautious approach has been a source of frustration for Eisenhower and other American generals. But now, with Operation Grenade, Monty aims to make up for lost time. As Allied forces press in from north and south, the Germans find themselves in an increasingly precarious position. Hitler, however, refuses to authorize a withdrawal. "Not one step back," he thunders during a staff meeting, his face flushed with rage. "We must hold every inch of ground." This stubborn refusal to yield in the face of a deteriorating strategic situation will prove costly for the German forces. Elite units, including the feared 1st SS Panzer Division, risk being cut off and destroyed. On December 30th, in a last-ditch effort to regain the initiative, the Germans launch Operation Nordwind in Alsace. This diversionary attack aims to draw Allied forces away from the Ardennes. But Eisenhower, displaying the strategic acumen that has served the Allies so well, refuses to take the bait. He authorizes only minimal forces to deal with Nordwind, keeping the focus firmly on reducing the Bulge. As 1944 gives way to 1945, the fighting in the Ardennes reaches a new level of intensity. The Americans, their blood up after the initial shock of the German offensive, attack with a ferocity that surprises even their own commanders. One such attack occurs near the town of Flamierge on January 3rd. A company of Sherman tanks from the 11th Armored Division, led by Lieutenant Charles Bulge, smashes through German defenses in a daring assault. Bulge, standing in the turret of his tank, urges his men forward. "Keep pushing," he shouts over the din of battle. "We've got these Krauts on the run." The German resistance, though fierce, is beginning to crack under the relentless Allied pressure. Fuel shortages, a chronic problem since the beginning of the offensive, now reach crisis levels. Many German tanks and vehicles are simply abandoned when they run out of gas, their crews forced to continue on foot. In the skies, the Allies achieved total dominance. On January 1st, the Luftwaffe launches Operation Bodenplatte, a massive air attack on Allied airfields in the Low Countries. While initially surprising, the operation proves to be a disaster for the Germans. They lose hundreds of irreplaceable aircraft and experienced pilots, effectively destroying the Luftwaffe as a fighting force in the West. As the battle grinds on, individual acts of heroism continue to light up the brutal landscape of war. Near the village of Bure, a young sergeant named José Lopez single-handedly holds off a German assault, manning a machine gun in an exposed position for hours. His actions save his company and earn him the Medal of Honor. By mid-January, the noose is tightening around the German forces in the Bulge. On January 13th, Soviet forces launched their long-awaited winter offensive in the east, putting additional pressure on Germany's overstretched resources. Hitler, finally recognizing the hopelessness of the situation in the Ardennes, reluctantly allows Model to begin withdrawing forces from the tip of the salient. The fighting, however, is far from over. The Germans contest every mile, leaving behind rear guards to slow the Allied advance. The winter weather, which had initially aided the German attack, now turns against them. Freezing temperatures and deep snow make the withdrawal a miserable, grueling experience. On January 16th, spearheads of Patton's Third Army, moving north, and Montgomery's forces pushing south meet at Houffalize. The Bulge is officially cut in two, and the German position becomes untenable. It's a moment of triumph for the Allies, but one tinged with the somber reality of the cost in lives and material. As news of the link-up spreads, a renewed sense of optimism sweeps through the Allied ranks. In a field hospital near the front, a wounded soldier named Jimmy reads the news in the Stars and Stripes. Despite the pain of his injuries, he manages a smile. "Knew we'd beat 'em," he says to the nurse, changing his bandages. "Ain't no Kraut gonna lick the US Army." The last phase of the battle becomes a race to the German border. Allied forces, their blood up and sensing victory, push forward with renewed vigor. The Germans, their grand offensive in tatters, fight desperate rearguard actions as they attempt to withdraw as much men and material as possible. On January 23rd, the last German forces are pushed back across the border, effectively ending the Battle of the Bulge. In just over a month of brutal fighting, the Allies have not only blunted Hitler's last great offensive, but have also inflicted a crushing defeat on the German army. The cost, however, has been staggering. The Americans suffered over 75,000 casualties, while German losses are estimated at between 80,000 and 100,000. Vast quantities of equipment have been destroyed on both sides, littering the once peaceful Ardennes with the detritus of modern warfare. As the dust settles, Allied commanders gather to assess the battle's impact. General Eisenhower, his face etched with the strain of the past month, addresses his staff. "Gentlemen," he says, his voice filled with quiet pride, "I believe this battle has broken the back of the German army. The road to final victory is now open. Indeed, the Battle of the Bulge proves to be Germany's last gasp in the West. Though fighting will continue for several more months, the outcome is no longer in doubt. Hitler's gamble has failed, and with it, any chance of Germany avoiding total defeat." For the American forces, the Battle of the Bulge becomes a defining moment of the war. It is a testament to their courage, resilience, and fighting spirit. From the dogged defense of Bastogne to Patton's audacious counterattack, the battle showcases American military prowess at its finest. The battle also leaves a lasting impact on the soldiers who fought in it. Many, like young Private First Class Martin, will carry the memories of those frozen forests for the rest of their lives. "I went in a boy," Martin would later recall, "and came out a man. We all did. The Bulge changed us." As January draws to a close, the Ardennes slowly returns to a semblance of peace. The guns fall silent, the tanks roll away, and the soldiers march on towards Germany. But the scars of battle remain, in the shell-pocked forests, the ruined villages, and in the memories of those who fought there. The Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last gamble, has ended in decisive Allied victory. The path to Berlin now lies open, and with it, the final chapter of the war in Europe. The greatest generation has been tested as never before and has emerged triumphant. Their sacrifices and valor in those frozen forests of Belgium and Luxembourg will be remembered for generations to come, a testament to human endurance and the indomitable spirit of freedom. In the years to come, the Battle of the Bulge will be studied in military academies around the world. Strategists will analyze Patton's rapid redeployment, the stubborn defense of Bastogne, and the coordination between ground and air forces. But for those who fought there, the battle will always be about more than tactics and strategy. It will be about the bonds forged in combat, the friends lost, and the challenges overcome. As the Allied armies push on into Germany, the lessons of the Bulge go with them. They've learned the importance of vigilance, the danger of complacency, and the power of determination in the face of overwhelming odds. These lessons will serve them well in the final months of the war and in the peace that follows. The Battle of the Bulge stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of freedom over tyranny. It reminds us that even in the darkest hours, when all seems lost, courage and determination can turn the tide. The men who fought in those frozen forests of the Ardennes didn't just win a battle.